is Woodlands Tacos and Code branch. We do also have one next month at the ION, another one at the Improving. So I want to welcome you guys to Sparksuite. Wes here, he's the CEO of Sparksuite. We're very grateful for letting us have this place to host us, and he provides tacos. So big warm welcome. So if you don't know, Sparksuite is a family of software companies built and supported by extraordinary people who are passionate about providing software. So you might meet some employees here who work for Sparksuite. Our goal with having this meetup here is people who are looking to get into tech. This is the kind of environment that we would be in. So if this is something that you're interested in, reach out to Wes. Corey here, he works for Sparksuite. I'm not sure if I think there's another couple ways to go reach out and learn more about Sparksuite. So, is there anyone here who's new to Code4Y'all? Oh man, this is quite a few people. So, very happy to see you guys. So, Code4Y'all, we want to leverage the community and to encourage people to learn how to code. I think it's very important, and I really believe that anyone can learn how to code. I myself started my journey in using a boot camp. I met some other people who started the journey at boot camp, but I ended up figuring out that I could learn everything I wanted to learn on the internet, and I was able to get a career into it. And I'm hoping it will inspire you guys to maybe get yourself a career into tech. So with all these presentations, you're not going to be an expert after you hear any of these presentations, but I want you guys to feel motivated to want to learn more. That's what got me into tech. I remember when I was doing my first boot camp, it was a struggle. I was like, I don't know what I'm learning. I attended a presentation by Google, and they were talking about TensorFlow. You guys are not familiar with that, right? It's like the basis for a lot of their machine learning. And it got me excited to want to learn more about machine learning. And I learned everything I could about TensorFlow. So I hope this presentation will do something similar. So I want to remind you all about Facebook, IG, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So you can follow us at Code4Y'all. And finally, if you guys want to join the Code4Y'all team, we're all volunteer-based. I encourage you guys. It would help you do multiple things. Welcome members, do presentations. Highly recommend it. Just talk. Last Woodlands, we had someone who came here who was from high school. And he attended one of our meetups, and I was like, hey, what made you decide to come here? And I asked, can you present something? It didn't matter what he presented, but he presented about gaming. And I think it was a really good presentation, and that leads me to our latest presenter. I don't know what happened here. Okay, I think it just kind of paused. But yeah, and it just I feel like everyone has something to talk about. So if you want to join the team, just scan this QR code. There's multiple things that we can put you in charge of, but we'd love to have you. So finally, GitHub Copilot. This is going to revolutionize coding. I'm excited to have Zuha. She was here for her first one at the Woodlands one, right?
Yeah, the Woodlands one was my first one.
And then she came to the Improving and she was talking about this, and I was like, can you present this? And she's going to present it for us today. So thank you, Zuha.
Thank you, William. Okay. Hey everyone, let me take a minute to introduce myself. My name is Zuha Beyabani. I'm a software engineer at S&P Global, and the team I'm working on is specifically focused on applied AI. I'm fortunate enough to be able to use GitHub Copilot and other AI solutions in my day-to-day life as a developer, so I'm very happy to be talking about GitHub Copilot today. Okay, before we get started, I do want to mention that I'm not associated with GitHub at all. They didn't sponsor me to do this workshop, so everything I say is my own. Just to give you a roadmap of what we're going to be talking about today, I'll do an introduction and overview of GitHub Copilot. We'll discuss positive, negatives, what we can use it for, what we cannot use it for, and then I'll do a little demo, and then we'll end with some tips and best practices for using GitHub Copilots. Okay, so first, what is GitHub Copilot? GitHub Copilot is basically a code completion tool developed by GitHub and OpenAI. It was a partnership back in 2021. GitHub is under Microsoft, so it was really a Microsoft and OpenAI partnership. And GitHub Copilot is integrated with popular code editors that you all might be using today: Visual Studio, Visual Studio Code, NeoVim, and JetBrains. Those are the ones that are supported right now. It works by basically analyzing the context of your code and producing or generating some sort of completion or suggesting code suggestions for whatever your context is. It's based on GPT-3 and GPT-4 today. Who knows what it will be based on in the future, but that's where we are today. It's trained on a massive data set of publicly available data, so Stack Overflow, GitHub, any open source repositories. GitHub Copilot is able to be trained on that. It does use the context of your project to generate its suggestions, but there is a little bit of a user element to it. You can pick and choose what you give it access to. That's not to say that it doesn't have access to everything else, but you can tell it to focus on certain things as you're doing it. Okay, so Copilot can also understand, like for example, if you put in comments or doc strings or anything like that, markup, Copilot can also understand and supports many other different types of programming languages and even things that aren't even programming languages. So it's able to comprehend anything that's basically publicly available and documented in a mass volume. Okay, so I wanted to include some metrics and data. There hasn't been, even though it's like widely used, there haven't been many studies or research done on it so far. So the only official metrics I could find were from GitHub studies done about a year ago, I believe. So according to GitHub, right now there are currently over 1 million paid subscribers using GitHub Copilot in over 50,000 companies as of last month. So that's what they announced in the Microsoft Build conference for 2024. Some of those companies include Duolingo, Stripe, Fidelity, Dell, Shopify, and there's a lot more. And about 1 in 3 Fortune 500 companies actually use GitHub Copilot and have adopted it fully within their companies today. So that's a lot of companies. Okay, so the pictures that I have up on the slide, this one on the left side was GitHub basically asked or did a survey in 2022 for about 2,000 developers. And they had 2,000 developers use GitHub Copilot, and then they asked them how they felt their productivity was affected by using GitHub Copilot. And you can see the data there. I won't go through them one by one, but essentially about 88% of developers said they felt more productive after using GitHub Copilot. And you can see the satisfaction, well-being, efficiency, flow data right there. On the right-hand side, that's a separate survey or study that was done by GitHub also. And they basically took 95 developers and split them into 2 groups. One group was asked to use GitHub Copilot, and the other was asked to stay away and not use GitHub Copilots. They were given the same task of writing a web server in JavaScript. And you can see that the group that used GitHub Copilots was 55% faster and had a higher completion rate. So there's real data to prove that this is actually making people more productive. Okay, I want to move on to some of the positives and pros, benefits that can come out of using GitHub Copilots. What it can help you with exactly, why is it useful, why we should be using it. So first of all, it increases productivity. And this was shown by the previous slide with the data. But also, I can attest to this myself as someone who uses GitHub Copilot for my company every day. This has really increased my productivity. And the way it does that is it reduces repetitive coding tasks. So essentially, it's not going to solve all your problems, but if you have some sort of boilerplate code or some sort of repetitive code that you need to put in every day, then it'll go ahead and do that for you, and it'll save you a lot of time in that way. So productivity increase and reducing repetitive coding tasks, these are all especially useful for large companies because when you put this at a larger scale, companies can save a lot of time and money and be a lot more efficient by using GitHub Copilot in this way. Copilot also, so whenever I say Copilot, I know there's Microsoft Copilot and there's a lot of other Copilots. I'm referring to GitHub Copilot specifically. I'm just shortening it. So whenever I say Copilot, assume GitHub Copilot. It also aids in learning. And what I mean by that is I already explained how it's useful for repetitive coding tasks, but even if you have like a complex coding problem that you're trying to solve by yourself, you can go to GitHub Copilot and kind of use it to bounce ideas off of it and use that to aid in your learning. It's like having like a smart pair programmer next to you 24/7 every day, basically. And the way it does that is it's basically like it's like an encyclopedia in a way. It has a lot of information. You can query it. You can get the advice as if you would go to a mentor or a senior developer and you would ask them, and they would tell you based on their experience. You can do this in this many ways. You can ask GitHub Copilot in the same way, and it'll suggest many different solutions. The only caveat here is that if you ask it for an answer directly, it'll only give you one solution. So you're going to have to prompt it and say, can you please provide me a list of solutions that might be helpful in this case? Or like what other technologies might be useful here? OK. Improving code quality, right? So there's a couple of things in improving code quality. One is that GitHub Copilot is not human. So for humans, it's really easy to miss a semicolon or miss a space. It won't have those issues. The other thing is that as you're using GitHub Copilot, and we'll talk about this later in the tips and best practices, as you're using it, you'll find yourself automatically writing better, more readable, more efficient, more maintainable, efficient code, because the way it makes you think and the way you have to code to get Copilot to understand what you're asking it to do will result in better code automatically. Like for example, when you're naming variables, you're going to want to name them appropriately and be really specific, and that'll make your code better. But like at the same time, it'll also help Copilot to understand what you're actually doing. Like I said, it supports a lot of programming languages, and the only thing here is that Copilot is obviously trained on public data. So if you have a very niche programming language that not many people use, that isn't very popular, you might have a bit more trouble getting Copilot to help you with that. JavaScript, I believe, is the one it's best at. It's better at front end than it is at back end. But that's just like a generalization. The best way to know is to try it and see what it can do. And that leads me into my next point. GitHub Copilot, like a lot of people ask, who is this a good tool for? Who can really benefit from it? And I think there's really two categories for this. One of them is junior developers or people who have recently made like a shift or working on something they haven't seen recently, working on something not too familiar to them. And in that case, GitHub Copilot can help by like helping with the syntax, so you don't have to go and research every single little thing, but also by providing you with like the broader context and giving you more information about a certain topic. The other way it can be really helpful is for senior developers, because senior developers will already have like a lot of knowledge. And so if they're working on something, they can use GitHub Copilot to generate like all the boilerplate code, and they'll know at a quick glance whether it's what they're looking for, whether it's the right code or not. If you're a junior developer and you're just starting out and you're trying to get ahead and you're trying to skip like the steps of learning how to actually code, then maybe that's not like the best approach for you. Like maybe you should invest more time in learning, even if it's through GitHub Copilot. But for senior developers, it's a lot better for skipping some code and just generating that boilerplate code automatically. OK. So it does work with popular code editors, like I mentioned. The big thing to note here is that I believe for NeoVim and JetBrains, or one of them, there's no chat feature. So it's not completely integrated fully. VS Code and Visual Studio are the best ones. Actually, Visual Studio Code, but Visual Studio also. Those are the two best IDEs for using GitHub Copilot because they're fully integrated. You can use them and get all the features automatically. When updates are rolled out, they're rolled out together. They complement each other really well. OK, so because there is this AI hype going around and everybody's trying to use it, I do want to mention some of the negatives so that everybody's aware and they don't just go to it and like, oh, this is magic. Let me just accept whatever suggestions it's giving me. So don't do that. The first negative I want to talk about is that developers can become overly reliant on it. And I can attest to this myself. I remember I had a meeting with my manager one day, and he asked if I was using GitHub Copilot at all, because they were trying to increase, they were trying to make a business case for rolling out more GitHub Copilot access tokens for their employees. And so he asked if I was using it at all. And I said, actually, yes, I'm using it every day. And then I told him, in fact, I'm using it so much that I feel like maybe I'm becoming overly reliant on it. And what he told me is that don't feel like that because GitHub Copilot is here to stay. It is the future. Even if you're becoming overly reliant on it, that's not a bad thing. I don't know how much I agree with that because I feel like as a developer, it's very important for you to focus on your own learning and to actually make sure that you're getting the fundamentals and the foundation right. So that's one of the negatives. Developers can become overly reliant on it. That does happen. OK, the other thing I wanted to talk about is potential for lazy coding. So what lazy coding is, for those of you who don't know, it's basically when you take the first solution that's given to you and you accept it, even though it might not be the right way or the best way of doing it. So it's very easy to get into this habit with GitHub Copilot because it's like the default way it helps you is by providing you one particular solution. And it'll say, this is the way to do this. And it won't suggest any other approaches. It won't tell you what the caveats are for doing it this way. Sometimes it won't even give you the right import statements that go with the code. So that's another negative. There's the potential for lazy coding. And I'm going to jump a little bit ahead to tech debt because lazy coding can sometimes actually increase the tech debt. And there's this term called AI-induced technical debt. And let me go back a bit. Tech debt, for those of you who don't know, is basically what arises when developers focus on rapid development and like quickly putting stuff out instead of focusing on code quality. So that's where tech debt comes from. The issue with GitHub Copilot that people don't really talk about nowadays, they will once it becomes more common, but the issue is that GitHub Copilot is very good at adding code. It's not so great at refactoring code or deleting code that's not being used. So it will go ahead and add like 5 functions based on what you're prompting it. Obviously, it'll add one, and then you'll say something else, it'll add another one. But you'll only really need one. And then if you're a junior developer, if you just don't notice or if you get careless, that'll accumulate, the fact that you didn't go back and refactor that or the fact that you didn't remove the code that's not being used. And it'll become technical debt that might be hard to deal with later. OK, mistakes, hallucinations, and errors. So as we all know, AI can make mistakes. I hope we all know. AI, there's a term going on recently. It's called hallucinations. AI can and does frequently hallucinate. For example, it'll make up certain functions that may not exist in your code, and it'll use them as if they exist. And it'll say it with full certainty that, yes, this does exist, and yes, you can use it, but it's not there, and you know it. So yeah, be careful for that. Mistakes, hallucinations, errors. So yeah, that's an example of how it can use context from your code in the wrong way. So for example, it might take something that you said and interpret it in a different way than what you meant. So one example for me is, or actually this is a different example. One example I wanted to mention is that the other day I was using Copilot to try to generate unit tests. And it's really great at that. I use that like very frequently. But this time I didn't, like I was setting up a new project and I didn't have any example tests for it to look at. So I just said generate unit tests. And I was using Angular in the front end. And it immediately generated unit tests using the Jest framework. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but it's not what you would be expecting because Angular and front end and Angular just uses Jasmine. So that's the testing library that's more frequently used. That's the one it works with. That's the one it's integrated with. And like it produced like this whole suite of tests, and they were exhaustive and they were right, but they weren't what I was looking for because I wanted them in Jasmine. So that's one thing it can do. The other thing is it might not fully understand like the variables you've defined. So even if you use very clear variable names, sometimes the way you phrase them or the way you write it, it might misunderstand them and then produce incorrect code based on that. So one example I have for this is that for my project at work, we're basically creating a chatbot, essentially, an AI chatbot. And so recently we added this feature where a user could like or dislike an AI sent message to get so we could get feedback. And the variable for that, my coworker defined the variable and named it as isLiked. And what he meant was, it's a Boolean variable, so if isLiked is true, then the user click like, and if isLiked is false, then the user click dislike. But GitHub Copilot obviously misunderstood that to mean that isLiked is false means nothing's present, it wasn't liked. That doesn't mean that it was disliked. So based on that assumption, it created or generated code that we didn't want to see. So its base assumption was wrong. And it kind of makes sense based on how my coworker defined the variable, but also that's something to watch out for. OK. So the other thing I wanted to say is that Copilot, in terms of mistakes, hallucinations, and errors, Copilot also has trouble with complex use cases or uncommon use cases. So this is kind of a weird example, but bear with me. The other day, just for fun, I was coding Fisher random chess. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of that. But it's basically chess, but the starting position is different. So all the pieces are randomly placed in a different starting location in those two same rows, but they're just randomized. And I was trying to code that game, right? And GitHub Copilot just kept flagging me and trying to restructure my code to make it work with the actual chess rules, because that's what it's familiar with. A lot of people have coded chess, so I assume that's in its database. But that's not what I wanted. So that's another thing for mistakes, hallucinations, and errors. Sometimes for overly complicated use cases, for anything special that's not normal, that's not what it would expect, it might not be the best thing to use. OK, the other thing is that GitHub Copilot can suggest insecure code. And this is a funny one, because GitHub Copilot cannot understand the security and the rules and regulations that your company has around your data. So it might suggest, and it's trained on Stack Overflow and other public databases, so it has really no concept of security. You have to actually prompt it in a certain way to get it to think about security. So be really careful about using GitHub Copilot to suggest code, because it can generate insecure code that maybe exposes an API key or something like that. OK, the last thing is privacy concerns. And so there's two things to this. One of them is that because this is on the internet and because GitHub Copilot uses your data in a way, you need to be careful about your company's policies regarding privacy. GitHub does say that they don't use this data to train the model like everybody else says. They also say that the data is only used for the real-time suggestions that it's generating, and then it's removed or whatever it is. It's not used anymore. But especially if you're part of a company, that's something you should be watching out for, privacy concerns. The other part of this is the code that's being generated, right? Because it's based on Stack Overflow. It's based on public code. And there's a concern there about plagiarism and copyright laws, because it's like how in AI, there's image generation, there's text generation. And that basically what that's doing is it's taking some sort of image or code in this case. It's breaking it up into separate little modules or pieces. And then it's putting them together and saying, oh, this is something new and original. But that's not necessarily the case. And I think there was a study done where it said that 1% of GitHub Copilot code that's being generated is actually legit copy-paste. But it's only 1%, but it's still there. That was, I think, a year ago. So I'm not sure if that's been changed recently. But that's what it was a year ago. So that's another concern to look at. GitHub, if you go on their website, there's a place on there that says that any code generated by GitHub Copilot doesn't need to be cited. It's yours. To me, that sounds a little like pushing off the responsibility, or I'm missing the word, but the responsibility onto you to make sure that your data or the code that you're using isn't actually copyrighted. So these are some things to look out for as you're using GitHub Copilot. OK, so I did want to include some sort of pricing slide, because I've been talking about GitHub Copilot, and you might think, oh, this is such a great tool, but how much does it actually cost? And the truth is, it's not that expensive. For individuals, it's only $10 with a 1-month free trial, which is what I'm using right now. So you can definitely go use it. It's actually free for verified students, teachers, and maintainers of popular open source projects. So if you're a student, as long as you have a student email, you can get this for free. Business is $19, and enterprise is $39. The biggest difference that I found between business and enterprise is enterprise is more integrated into your company specifically. So it'll help you in a way that's more specific to your company. And I'll give an example later. But I also put a QR code up there to the pricing page on their website if anybody's curious about that. OK, so I do want to get into the demo. But before I do that, I wanted to do a demo of the things like I can't access on my individual account. So this is from the MS Build conference. And it's about workspace, which is, well, workspace is a feature that's available to everybody. But the features they're talking about in this video specifically are only for the enterprise plan. So it's not for individuals, but I wanted to show it to you guys anyways. And I'm hoping the sound works. It might be loud, I don't know. Yeah, OK. So I hope you guys were able to catch that. But basically, they have this new integration for Workspace for the enterprise plan that will let you actually create a full plan in GitHub and then pull that in and actually implement it using GitHub Actions. What did I want to say about this? I don't remember, but it's OK. We'll move on. Oh, OK. I wanted to say, sorry, let me go back. I wanted to say that about 4 days ago, they actually announced, so they already had like a GitHub support type thing. You can use Copilot inside of GitHub. But 4 days ago, they actually added, like if you go into, for example, like GitHub issues, you can get a summary for that. And there's lots of like new text summarization and like NLP stuff that they recently added that's related to GitHub specifically. And using that like directly in the browser. And I think it also works for mobile. So that's something they added 4 days ago, which is really exciting. OK, so this is also from MS Build. And I'm doing this as a video because I'm not going to demo the voice, and I'm not going to demo extensions. So I'll just show that in this video here. It's essentially like it can work with voice processing. So you can speak to it, and it'll reply in whatever language. I assume in whatever language. I'm assuming most languages are supported. This one's in Spanish. And then extensions also.
GitHub Copilot gives you suggestions in your favorite editor, like here, where I'm writing unit tests. Copilot is great at meeting you where you're at, regardless of the language you're most comfortable with. So let's ask for something simple, like how to write a prime number test in Java. But let's converse in Spanish using my voice. ¿Cómo verificar si el número dado es un número primo en Java? Look at that. Gracias, Copilot. Copilot is great at turning natural language into code and back again. But what about beyond the code? With the new GitHub Copilot extensions, you can now bring the context from your connected systems to you. So now I can ask Azure where my app is deployed. I could ask what my available Azure resources are, or I could diagnose issues with my environment. And this isn't just for Azure. As Satya announced, any developer can now create extensions for GitHub Copilot, and that includes any tool in your stack, including your in-house tools, keeping you in the flow across your entire day. Actually,
OK, that's pretty much all I wanted to show. The rest of it is more talk about extensions. But I don't have any extensions set up today, so I wanted to show that in this video. And also, you guys saw the Spanish. That's pretty cool. It's amazing to see. I don't know about you guys. I'm excited about that.
Did it code it in English or Spanish? I couldn't see the text.
Oh, here, let me go back. I believe it coded in English, but we can go back. Oh, that doesn't work. OK.
Sure, it's probably English.
It's in English, but the text was in Spanish.
GitHub Copilot gives you suggestions in your favorite editor, like here, where I'm writing unit tests. Copilot is great at meeting you where you're at, regardless of the language you're most comfortable with. So let's ask for something simple, like how to write a prime number test in Java, but let's converse in Spanish using my voice. ¿Cómo verificar si el número dado es un número primo en Java? Look at that. Gracias, Copilot. Copilot.
Yeah, so you can see like the text is in Spanish, but the actual code is obviously in English. Yeah. OK, so before we get into the demo, I want to pause and see if there are any questions. No questions? For later? OK. OK, demo time. Let me close out of this. And I put a link up here for getting started. I have it set up on my end already, so it's not going to let me like recreate an account. But essentially, you just go to this website, and you scroll down to the pricing. And then you just start a free trial, buy now, or whatever you want. And it'll take you through the process. I think I'm logged in already, so it's not going to work here. Yeah, you can see it's already active for my account. But essentially, that's how you would do it. And then it has like a step-by-step process of actually purchasing the prescription or activating the 1-month free trial. And then what you do is, so I don't know if I have this open, but essentially what you need to do is you need to install the GitHub Copilot extension in your code editor. So for Visual Studio Code, that's very easy. You just go to, here, I can show it. You just go to the extensions. That's not extensions. Extensions. And then you search for GitHub Copilot. And GitHub Copilot chat is automatically added once you install this extension. So if you're using Visual Studio Code, you just go to extensions, search GitHub Copilot, install that extension, and then you should be able to see it working. The way you know that it's working is at the bottom. I don't know if you guys can see it. It's really small, but there's this little GitHub Copilot icon. So that's how you know it's working. And then it'll also add this little chat to the left-hand side of your menu. But yeah, it's very easy to get started with. They've made it very, very easy, especially since it's so integrated into VS Code. But let me get to the demo. So I set up a Python notebook before I got here. It's empty right now. But what we're going to do is make a code block. And then, so there's a couple of different ways to use GitHub Copilot in your IDE. There's actually a lot of ways. I'm going to try to cover as many as I can. I also covered some in the videos earlier. But basically, wherever you see a little sparkle icon, I'll show you an example later. But whenever you see the sparkle icon, that's some place where GitHub Copilot can help you. And there's a lot of places around your IDE. You just need to keep an eye out for them. Sorry. Yes, sorry. Is that better? A little bigger? No, let me go back, because I can't type now. OK. So let me start off with something really basic so that you guys can see how it works. Let's say at any point, you can click Control-I, or I guess it's Command-I on a Mac, and that'll open up an inline Copilot chat. So you can type. They have a couple of commands that you can use, slash commands. There's hashtags. There's the @sign. But just to start off, I'm going to go really basic. I'm just going to say print hello world. And then press Enter. GitHub Copilot will go ahead and generate that code for me. And what I want to point out is that it's not automatically adding that code in there. It's just leaving it there as a suggestion. You can accept it, discard it, ask it to regenerate a different code, or whatever you want to do there. So I'm going to accept this because I did it right. And then I can run it, and it'll print hello world. So that's a really basic example, but that's essentially how it can help. The other thing I want to point out is I can use comments. So for example, if I write a comments and I say, create this function, and then I press enter, it'll go ahead and auto-complete my code and fill in the function. So let me show you that with let's do a function to calculate, or actually it wants to calculate the factorial of a number. You can see it's already completing my sentence right there. So I started writing a comment, and then it auto-completed it. I can press tab to automatically accept a suggestion, or I think it's control arrow to accept partial suggestions. I'll take this, and then, so if I press enter, it'll automatically start generating the function. So I just need to press tab, and then, so before, I want to say earlier this year, before the recent updates, after it generated the comment, it would automatically generate the entire function in one go for you. But as of right now, you have to actually start the function. So for example, it auto-completed that first line for me, and then I had to press enter and accept that suggestion before it brought in the rest of the function. So it goes incrementally now. So if you start typing and you only get one line, that's why. Just wait, keep accepting, and eventually it'll get where you want it to go. OK, so it came up with a function. Now it wants to write another function, but let me go back and actually say, generate some test cases. Test cases? I like the word cases better than data. OK, so it came up with a few test cases. Now, usually what it would do is, like the few times I've used this with Python before, what it does is it gives you like a list of test cases one by one instead of using the for loop. And then at the end, it'll put a comment and say, this should be the answer of the test case. This time it didn't do that, maybe because of the way I phrased it, generate instead of come up with, I don't know. But yeah, so the way you prompt it really matters. And I know there's a lot of people talking right now about prompt engineering. It's definitely worth your time if you're getting into artificial intelligence now. I don't think it'll be such a big deal later on, but kind of is right now, so that's just part of that. Yeah, so you can see it generated those test cases, and then it ran them. Let's see. OK, so the next thing I want to do is I want to do the same thing, but here, let me add a code block. Or actually, let me point out something first. One thing that GitHub Copilot doesn't do really well is it doesn't handle edge cases, and it doesn't do the, it doesn't handle errors, basically. So if if n was a negative number here, this would fail, right? We can try it, but let's see. Or actually, let me do it with GitHub Copilot so that I'm using it. Generate a test case with a negative number. You can see it keeps running, and then eventually it'll fail, because the code wasn't written to handle a negative number as an input. And so that's something it won't automatically do. It won't automatically handle errors. Even when I'm using it with like Angular, NGRX, state management, it won't handle errors automatically. That's something I need to go in and add myself. So yeah, that's something I wanted to point out. Let's see what else. OK, so if I go ahead, so there's a few different ways to use this chat feature on the side. What I'm going to do right now for this demo is I'll go ahead and select. Actually, let's try it this way. I want to see what it'll do. So essentially, it should be able to use, the way context works is that it should be able to use everything that you're able to see in your little viewing window for GitHub Copilot, or sorry, for VS Code. And it should be able to use that to generate the answer to the question you're asking in chat. It will also use any open tabs that you have. So all of the tabs that you have open in Visual Studio Code will get used. And it gives more weight to the tabs that are closer to the one you're currently working in and the ones that were open more recently. So it does keep track of that and it does use that. And the reason it's doing that is it's trying to follow like your normal development process. Normally you start writing a function, maybe you switch to a different tab, maybe you write some sort of interface and then you switch back. So that's why it's built that way. But you should know that like as you're using GitHub Copilot, if you're working on one specific task, keep the tabs open until you're done with that task and then close them out. If you switch tasks and you start working on something completely different, go ahead and close all the tabs that are currently open and only open the ones that are like relevant to that, because otherwise it'll try to use that for context. Okay, so yeah, so as long as this function is in our viewport, it should be able to use that. What I want to do is say, let me select it actually. So if you select it, it'll focus on those specific lines. I want it to focus on the function. And I want to say, please handle negative numbers. So you can see it's using cell2, and then it gives you the lines. And then it tells you what it's going to be doing. So sure, we can handle negative numbers by raising an exception. It'll tell you what it wants to do. And then it'll give you some code. And there are a couple of things you can do with code generated in the GitHub Copilot chat feature. There's copy. There's also insert at cursor. So wherever your cursor is, it'll insert that code there. And you can also insert it into a new file or insert it into a terminal. So there's a couple of options there. This time, I'm just going to copy it and then replace this function with this. And then if I run it, it should handle the error. Yeah, so it's giving a value error now. And that's what we're expecting. Input must be a non-negative integer. And you can see it's saying that down here. OK. So that's how you use the chat feature. There are a couple of things you can do in here that I'll show later. But for now, let me write a different. So this was a function to calculate, right? So, oh, by the way, one thing I do want to mention is that if you guys are ever using AI for anything related to math, be very careful with that, because AIs in general are not good with calculations or math, especially when it comes to larger numbers. That's why ChatGPT has specific plugins for math. OK. So this was a sort of a math function. Let me write a different one that's for validation. So what do I want to do? Let's say validate phone number. OK, so I use this example because I wanted to point out that it will make assumptions. So here it's making an assumption that phone numbers should be 10 of length and digits. So that works for us, but it's something you should keep in mind. And then, so because I've done this already in my code, like earlier in the same file, I said, write this function and then generate test cases. So because I've done that, it's trying to follow the pattern of my code. And so it's automatically saying, generate some test cases. And we'll take that suggestion and see what it comes up with. So you can see, like, for phone numbers, I had to press enter once, tab. And then for the for loop, I had to press it again. So that's something new they're doing. And yeah, you can see it tested them based on length being 10 and also all of them being digits. OK, so the other thing is, if you have any sort of, I think I mentioned this before, but if you have any sort of like common framework, common technology that there's a lot of documentation on online, it'll be able to use that. So for example, regular expression, a lot of people use that. There's probably a lot of documentation on it. We can probably try to do this, or maybe I should use like an email address. Maybe validate email address. Okay, I knew what I was going to do. Using regular expression, there we go. So it imports, and then let me scroll down, validate email, and then it writes that function. And then it automatically generates the test cases. I wanted to point this out, so let me do it right now. You see this little sparkle right there? That's what I meant. When you see that symbol, that's some place where you can use GitHub Copilot. OK, I don't know what it's doing now. Just went into an infinite loop of generating quotation marks. Let's try that again. No, OK, it does not like this. What if I help it out? OK, so if I type up until there, it'll generate some more. But you saw earlier, like I started typing, and it immediately put in a quotation mark, and then another one, and then another one, and it just kept going. So be careful with that. It really depends on how you prompt it. If you know what you're doing and you have some knowledge about it and you know how to prompt it in a certain way, like for example, I knew that there should be email addresses there, then I can start typing and then it'll catch up. But just be careful when you're using it in that way. Yeah, so because we used the for loop in the beginning, it's going to keep using the for loop for test cases because it thinks I approved. I did approve. It thinks I approved that way of testing, so now it's going to keep reusing that format. But if we had accepted, if we had asked it for, let's say, a different code completion before, and we had prompted it in a way that where it generated them line by line instead of using a for loop for test cases, then it would have continued doing that throughout the file. So that's why it's doing it this way. And then we can run it, and you can see it'll validate those emails based on regular expression. So the example here, why I use this is because as long as you have something that's commonly used that has a lot of documentation, it's able to work with it. So even though like it's regular expression and not like code exactly, it's able to work with it. OK. OK, the other thing I wanted to show using Python specifically is the slash. So there are a couple of different slash commands. And if I type slash here, you can see them pop up. There's explain, there's API, search, fix, new notebook, test, help. And you can use these with any of the @ signs. So there's 3 @ signs. There's terminal, VS Code, and workspace. Workspace is basically the code, the project that you're working on. Terminal is the terminal. And Visual Studio Code is Visual Studio Code. So if you have any questions about VS Code or extensions, integrations, you can ask those using that. So here, I want to show you guys the new notebook. So when you click new notebook, it'll automatically add the @ workspace because it knows that's what you're trying to do. And then as long as you add some sort of prompt here, like for example, let's say sum 2 numbers, make it easy, it'll go ahead and make a new notebook for that. So you can see it's going through a couple of steps. First, it defines what it thinks you want from it. And then it says create notebook. And if you click that, it'll make the notebook. What it's doing here, and you'll see this with a lot of AIs. I don't know this for sure, but this is my guess based on what I've seen so far. There's usually one AI that's like the head AI, the master, the controller. And it'll go ahead and command other smaller, more specific AIs to go ahead and do certain things, and then come back and combine them into whatever you're asking for. So here we create notebook, and you can see it's generating it. So there's define the numbers, sum the numbers, print the result. So it basically came up with an entire Python notebook, and I didn't have to do anything. It defines numbers, it adds them up, and then it prints the result. So that's pretty cool. I think those are all the examples I wanted to show with Python. I did have another example with Angular. It's a very basic example, like a front end. Very basic, like a to-do list. but I figured it would be a good way of showing this. So let me go ahead and run this. How many of you guys have worked with front-end or Angular or React before? OK. So for those of y'all who haven't, I know it looks like a lot of files, but it's really not that much. The main part is just the app component HTML file, the CSS file, and the TypeScript file. So those three are really the main things you should be looking at. So here, OK, so I made a really basic to-do list. And let me actually open it up. Yeah, so you can see it's really basic. There's just an input bar and then an add task button. So let me show you what it looks like right now so you can see. If I say, for example, do laundry, and then I add task, it'll make that task. And it's really small. Let me zoom in. OK, so it'll add that task. And you can check it off. You can uncheck it. It's just a basic, really basic to-do list. So the first thing I want to do here is I want to open up chat. And oh, OK, let me show you how to do this. So you can make a new chat by clicking on this plus button. It'll make a new chat, and it'll basically get rid of all the context that was already stored in the previous conversation. So if you've gone through a couple of prompts, you'll notice with AI that it starts losing track really quickly. So it's always good to start off fresh, just make a new chat. This is the history button. So if you click this, it'll show your previous chats. Right now, there's 2 in the history. It goes by whatever you typed in first. So your first user input is what the title of the conversation is. And then, yeah, you can also open chat in an editor, new window, send chat feedback. Let me zoom this in, because I remember the other one was really small. OK. So I'm going to go here. And there's a couple of ways to tell GitHub Copilot to focus on one file. The one I usually use, because it's the easiest, is just select the entire text and tell it to use that. But there are other ways. Specifically, I think the hashtag is the one that's most used. So there's a couple of options that come up. Editor is basically what's in your viewport right now. File, you can specify which file to focus on. Selection is whatever text you've selected with your cursor. And then you can also tell it to look at the terminal last command or terminal selection. And that's mostly for like extra prompting. If, for example, you try something and it doesn't work exactly as you expect, then you can try this as a secondary step to see if that'll improve your response. So I mean, just for variety, I'll do file here. I don't know if that worked, but let's see. File. OK, now it worked. app.component.html. So I'm telling it to look at this file. And then I'll say, please. Oh, by the way, AIs respond really well to politeness. So please use the word please and thank you. Please use Bootstrap styles to make this web page look more professional and user-friendly. This is a prompt I came up with right now. And I'm hoping what it'll do is it'll add some styles here to this HTML page to make the project that we have look more professional. OK, so you saw this little pop-up right there. I can probably open it back up, use 2 references. And I want to say something about that. So let's see. Use 2 references. I might have to wait until it finishes generating. But essentially, it used the file that I attached. So it used this file that's open, app.component.html. So it used that because I specifically attached it with the hash code. But it also used the file, the same file, again, because it was open already. So it's using the context of what it has open. And then it also specifically used the file I attached because I asked it to do that. So you can see like the second one, it says file. The first one, it just used it because it was open. So that, yeah. OK, so it came up with a bunch of HTML. And I'm going to actually just go ahead and copy this and paste it in here and see what it looks like. OK, so you can see that it added like a lot of styles, and it made the input and the button look a lot more professional. It also added a placeholder, if you guys have noticed. I was going to tell it to do that, but it just did it on itself, so that's great. I also want to add a header. So let me go ahead and go to the top and then say, please add a header to this page. And I want to see what it comes up with, because I didn't specify what header to use. Yeah, so just looking at it, it looks like it generated its own header called Task Manager. So that's pretty cool. And it actually went ahead and created an entire navigation bar, which I didn't ask for, but it did it. So let's see what that looks like. OK, so there's Task Manager. You can see it on the left-hand side. And then if you click it, it just reloads the page, basically. And you can still add tasks. It'll show up. Or actually, it's not showing up. So let me go ahead and go here and tell GitHub Copilot that the tasks aren't showing up, and see what it does based on that. So this is essentially like how I use GitHub Copilot day to day. I will, like, if I find an error, I'll go ahead and put it back in the chat, and I'll say, I'm getting this error. Can you please figure out what's going on? And it's usually pretty good at doing that. Yeah, OK, so because I just copied and pasted the code directly, since it was a demo and I didn't really look at it, it looks like it created like an empty brackets, and it didn't actually add any variables to that. So let me see where that's at and add that in. So we just needed this task.name. It was there before, but while it was generating this code, it just took that part out. So yeah, just be careful as you're using code directly from GitHub Copilot. And then now if I go back and I put in a task, yeah, there we go, it worked. It did remove my checkbox, though, so that's upsetting. Yeah, it looks like it just removed my checkbox completely. Let me tell it to add it back. Can you add a checkbox before every task in the list, so that it knows exactly what task I'm talking about? Yeah, so it does have a mind of its own at sometimes. Be careful as you're using it. Usually I don't use it for generating blocks of code like this. Usually I'm using it to troubleshoot. But hey, this is good experience. And then let's see if it'll work this time. So there is a checkbox, and I can check it. So that's great. Now, when I check this box, I do want the to-do list to be crossed off, because obviously, like, that's what it should do. Can you cross out the task when it's checked off? You can see it's using the reference lines 16 to 36, which is like basically what I have open. OK, so the way it did it is it added this CSS class, and then it wants me to go ahead and add this to my CSS file. So instead of adding it directly into the HTML, it actually wants me to add a CSS file now, which is fine, but that's just one way of doing it, right? So I'll go ahead and accept the suggestion for now, but keep in mind that it will only give you one solution. OK, so export, and this is my CSS file, so I'll add that here. And let's see if that works. Yeah, OK. So you can see it added that strike through using the CSS class. So whatever it knows about based on the data it's trained on, it can do. If there's something that you're trying to do that's very niche, then it's better for you to just go ahead and take a look at that and use it more for research purposes in that way. And I'll talk about this later also, but one of the suggestions I have for GitHub Copilot is to use it in conjunction with other AI tools. Because GitHub Copilot was specifically developed for code completion. It's very good at what it does, most of the time, as you can see. But if you can use other technologies, like for example, what I use is ChatGPT, the free version. If you use that for more of your research side of things, and you use Copilot for more of the code side of things, I feel like that combination works really well. OK, what else did I want to talk about?
Can you ask it? I want to see if you can ask it to consider a jumbotron.
Consider what?
Jumbotron. J-U-M-O, jumbo.
Jumbo? Here, you're going to have to spell that out for me. Is that part of the HTML file? Or do you want me to specify a file? HTML? OK. Consider, what is it?
Considering a jumbo, like jumbotron.
What is it? T-R-O-N? What is that?
It's a fairly common front-end.
OK.
It's everything it has. If it knows what it is, like basically it's still.
OK, it looks like it was able to recognize it. So sure, you can use Bootstrap's Jumbotron component to highlight key content on your page. Here's how you can add it to your page. And then it gives you some code. Yeah. So it adds it at the top of your page with the title and a lead paragraph. It's a flexible and extensible container for showcasing key content on your site. So it does explain what it is, which is what I like about GitHub Copilot. And then it also gives you the code. So let me go ahead and add this. OK, it's a lot bigger than I was expecting, but that's cool. So yeah, as long as it has the information about it, you can use it. Sorry, go ahead.
Can you ask why it made tasks observable?
What do you mean observable?
So it's an observable. Yeah, it's using the async pipe on it instead of it just being an.
OK, so I'm using the async pipe. I think that's code I set up beforehand because I was using NGRX for state management. Because at first I wanted this to be a bit more of a bigger project. So I think that one's on me.
Okay,
Yeah, but I can still ask it and see what it says. Let's see. So right here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. OK, so I'll just ask it, why is tasks an observable? Yeah, so it's going to give you a definition of observable. And OK, let's see. Yeah, it's basically defining what it is, and it's saying what it's doing. But it's not telling you why it chose that specifically. Maybe because it didn't, but yeah. Update the view whenever a new list. So it's also explaining the async pipe, which is helpful. Like for example, if you didn't know what that was, it's good to have that explanation. So in that same vein, sorry, I'll get to your question one second. In that same vein, let me go to the TypeScript. So you can see like here, this is where I'm defining it. But what I wanted to show you guys is I can actually go here, and I don't think you have to select the entire file. I think you can just right-click. This is another place where you can use Copilot. You can just right-click, go to Copilot, and then it gives you a list of options you can do. So here I want to generate documentation to show that feature. And I think it'll just do that for the entire file, but let's see. Yeah, so it went ahead and added documentation comments to the entire file, literally everything. But yeah, so it's able to do that, and I can just accept that suggestion and I'll have it. So it saves you a lot of time for documentation. What were you asking?
Actually, it was just that question about like adding comments. Can it also make like external like markdown files or something about like what the file is doing? Like for someone who's like new that wants to just kind of get an overview, or like upper management that kind of just wants to get a bird's eye view of what's going on with like a particular code. Can it do that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it can. So let me go to the component, HTML, and then chat and say, please generate a markdown file for this. And let's see what it comes up with. Yeah, so it came up with a few different, yeah, OK. So I know it's really zoomed in, so I'm having to scroll up and down. But essentially, it gives you this representation. And then it gives you the information about tasks list. So it can do this. I don't think it automatically creates the file. Or actually, maybe it does. If you say, oh, like create, insert into new file, this part will just be put in. But yeah, some of it you'll have to do manually. But it does do some of the work for you, which is really cool. OK. The other thing I wanted to point out is unit tests, right? So for me as a developer, unit tests take a lot of time and a lot of energy. So when I found out about this feature, this was really exciting for me. But you can go to Copilot and say, generate tests. And so there's a couple of ways to use Copilot in Visual Studio Code. I'm using the way I'm more comfortable with, the one I use more often, which is the right click. But you can also go to the chat and type /tests, and it'll do the exact same thing. So generate tests. And here, what it does, it tries to create a file. Or if the file's already there, it'll use that. But it usually tries to put the tests in a different file than what you're in currently. So you can see it came up with a few tests. And what it's showing is basically the difference between what the test file looked like before versus what it wants it to look like after it adds all this code. And I'm going to go ahead and accept this. But the thing with generating tests is that usually if you already have tests in your file, it'll try to append them at the very bottom. So you'll have all your imports and your tests, and then it'll go ahead and write all the imports again at the bottom. So you usually just have to replace it, but we'll see. So let me go ahead and go to my test file. And yeah, you can see it did exactly that. So we have the imports, and then this is what was there already. And then this is what it just added at the bottom. So it went ahead and added all the imports again and all the tests for everything. And it's interesting that it actually split this up into two different things. But at least it used Jasmine this time instead of Just, so I'm just grateful for that. So I can get rid of these old tests. And let's actually run this. I want to see if it'll work. Run test. It might not work. I'm just curious to see. If it doesn't, we can debug it together with Copilot. You can also see that it used the router testing module. I'm pretty sure that's deprecated now. So like that's one limitation of GitHub Copilot. Its knowledge does have a cutoff in terms of date time. Yeah, OK, it looks like it's starting up. And it has 8 tests, and all of them passed. So that's pretty impressive. So I've watched a few videos comparing GitHub Copilot to other code generator tools. And GitHub Copilot has stood out as one of the best AI code tools specifically for exhaustive testing. It does a really good job of coming up with different unit test cases and testing all of them. So that's what I like about it. OK, let me see what else I wanted to cover. Oh, yeah, explain. OK, so if I go to this TypeScript, and you can see like I added documentation. So now it's a bit more clear what everything does. But I do want to show you what it looks like if, for example, actually, let me go to the NGRX state management files, which I wanted to set up and do something cool with, but it's OK. So if I go here, and I can actually, let me use the / command this time so I cover my bases. But you can type /explain. And right now, it's calling the terminal because it thinks you want an explanation of something in the terminal. So I'm actually going to go back. And I think there was an option to do this earlier. I just clicked the wrong thing. But explain. Yeah, so explain workspace is what I'm looking for, because I'm looking for an explanation of my code and not something in the terminal. So yeah, I think it'll work if I just hit enter. We'll see. It might need a prompt. OK, so it looks like it's working. It's going to give you a step-by-step explanation of the entire code because I selected the entire file. But yeah, like this is something I also use a lot at work, especially if it's code that was written by somebody other than me, which is very common when you're working. There's a lot of code that's written by other people, and sometimes it's not very clear what they were going for. So if you use explain, you can get like, I don't want to say this is what you should use and you should stop here, but this can be a good starting point for you to know what to research and what to look into to understand the code better. So you can see here, it tells you like what the function is, and then yeah, it'll tell you it returns initial state. So yeah, it's just describing the reducer. So this is really helpful for me personally. Let's see, what else? There's a lot of things you can do here. Like for example, I could use this to add like a notification service to the to-do list that I have. I can use it to generate functions to delete tasks, because right now I'm only adding tasks. I can use it to create like a server and then store the tasks. There's a lot you can do. But we are running a little low on time, so let me see if there's anything else I wanted to talk about specifically. Oh yeah, there's also fix. So let me go to the component, because that's what we were working with earlier. So this is a very elementary, kind of a dumb example, but let me just remove a letter and then ask Copilot to fix this. And the way you do that is just use the /fix, or you can Control-I, go into the inline chat, say fix this, or you can do quick fix and then say fix using Copilot. You see the little stars icon, or you can right-click, select text, right-click, and then do Copilot fix this. So there's a lot of options to do the same thing, but let's see, this time I'll just do this way, because I don't think we've seen this one before. And yeah, it just adds the E. So that's a very simple example, because I am a little low on time, but that's another thing you can do with GitHub Copilot. OK, so that's it for the demo. Are there any other questions for the demo? Or I'm going to go back to the presentation. OK. OK, so I wanted to talk about some common issues and limitations that GitHub Copilot has. And the example that I'm giving here, OK, so I had that API key blocked off when it was on my laptop. I guess that didn't transfer over. Or maybe it's an animation. No, it's not. OK, so don't worry about it, because that key is deprecated, so it's fine. But normally, yeah, that should be covered. Or actually, I guess it moved it up. You can see the block off, but it's right next to import. But essentially, like the example that I wanted to show here is that I was trying to create like an AI assistant chatbot completion. And I wanted I asked Copilot to put it in a function that I could reuse outside of this file, and it did that. But the thing here is that it's returning it as module.exports, and the best way to do this would actually have been to create a service. So it did do what I asked, but it didn't tell me that there was a better way to do it in a service instead. So that's something I wanted to mention. It'll give you one answer, but it's not necessarily the best answer. Other common issues include missing imports. It'll give you the code without the import that you need. Context misunderstanding, which we talked about, lack of error handling, and single suggestions. It'll only give you one suggestion instead of like a lot of options. You can prompt it to say, please give me multiple suggestions, but it won't do that on itself. OK, and then I wanted to end with some tips. So if you're using GitHub Copilot, make sure you name your variables appropriately, because if you don't be specific, like for example, when I was using isLiked for my feedback, it won't know what you're trying to do. Be specific about what you want. So like you can see while I was typing those commands, I was being very specific and clear. So make sure you do that. Keep the relevant files open. Use comments, because GitHub Copilot will also use comments. It will help Copilot understand what you're trying to do, and it'll also be good for making your code more readable. Combine with other tools, for example, ChatGPT. And the best way to learn this and actually like get the most out of it is to play around with it, test it out for your use cases, and see what it can really do. And then I wanted to end on kind of like a hopeful note. AI tools like GitHub Copilot serve as valuable assistants, but they cannot replace the nuanced understanding, creativity, ethical judgment, and collaborative skills that human developers bring to the table. Yeah, Copilot can do a lot, but there's a lot of that it can't do. And I don't think we're anywhere near it being able to do these things. So don't worry about AI taking over your job. I was actually at a conference type thing earlier today, and there was a quote there that I found very, very interesting and very inspirational. So the presenter said something like, AI won't be taking over your job, but the people who use AI and who leverage those tools, they will be taking your job. So if you're not keeping up with technology, if you're in the developer space and you're not keeping up with technology, if you're not leveraging these tools to their extent to maximize your productivity, then that's something, then your job, that's something you should worry about. But don't worry about AI taking your job, because there are so many things it can't do. Like you saw in this demo, it's like, another example they used today was like a jagged frontier. AI right now it can do amazing things, but it can also not do things that you thought it might be able to do. So it's like kind of like a child prodigy in a sense, like it's really good at some things, but it's still a child at the end of the day. That might have been a bad example, but you know what I mean. Like it can do great things, but it's no substitute for humans. And if you're using it to code, do not use it as a replacement for senior dev code reviews, okay? Please don't do that, because they're nowhere near comparable. You want to make sure somebody is looking over your code. And yeah, that's all I had for today. I'll be around for questions. That QR code goes to my LinkedIn if you want to connect with me. Thank you guys for listening. Yes.
Question.
Yes.
At the beginning, you said that you thought it was really good for people who were new and just weren't even quite sure where to start. It was also very good for people who were more senior devs who could instantly look at something and say, yes, I want these 20 lines, go put it in.
Yeah.
And sure. What about for people that are in the middle?
So I still think it's a wonderful tool.
And how do they go about?
Yeah, so all of the things I say still apply to those middle people. I still think it's a wonderful tool. The reason I mentioned junior devs and more senior devs is because I think those are the two people who can get the most value out of this tool, but anybody can really benefit from it. Like I said, the tips that I gave, just follow those and use it as a kind of a balance. Use it to increase your productivity, to generate boilerplate code that you're having to type repetitively for repetitive tasks, but also balance that with using it to explore and learn new things. You can ask it, you can prompt it, say, this is my problem, this is what I'm trying to accomplish, what do you suggest? What are some good approaches for this? Or sometimes you can even feed back the code that it generated into GitHub Copilot, like send it the same code it gave you, and then ask, is this really a good approach? Is this the best solution? Is there a way to make this more efficient? Can you refactor this? Things like that. Just ask it to reevaluate itself, because AI, sometimes it might make mistakes and it might generate wrong code, but if you prompt it and tell it, I think you might have made a mistake, can you double check? Then it's really good at finding its own mistakes.
So the problem that I'm at right now is whenever I try to do AI to do stuff with code, it's either I'm trying to do something that's too complicated and I can't figure out how to do it, I'm like, yeah, it's probably too complicated. Or it's like, it generates something that I'm like, it would have just been faster for me to type it rather than trying to go through the prompts. Along those lines, it's because I think I'm kind of at this middle level. How big of a chunk of a code completion do you think is reasonable for it to handle? So like for the demo, we were talking like what, maybe like 10 lines or something like that.
Something like that.
But that's because it's a demo. Like in real life, about how much of a chunk of code do you think?
So it depends on the type of code. For example, when I was coding chess, if I was doing not Fisher random chess, if I was just doing regular chess, I had to type up these functions for getting the pieces to move. And so bishop movement, rook movement. And I already knew what that would look like. So when I saw like the code completion pop up, I knew this is what I wanted. And it was maybe like 10, 20 lines of code at a time, and it was multiple times for each piece of each chess piece. But I did that acceptance because I knew how the pieces moved, right? So it also depends on the code. If it's a boilerplate code, like for example, Angular NGRX has state management, has a lot of boilerplate code, writing the selectors, writing the actions, reducer, all of that stuff. If it's a lot of boilerplate code, I would say go ahead and accept it, even though it's like a lot. Just make sure you review it and test it, obviously. But like in that case, even if it's a lot, you can accept it. But if it's something very specific to your use case, there's no limit. Don't even go to one line of code. Don't even accept one or two, because you need to really like focus and research and find a good way of doing it. There have been problems at my workplace where I have spent days just researching for that one line. and I don't accept the solutions that GitHub Copilot gives me because I think there's a better way. So it depends on your use case. I hope that answered your question. Yeah.
The bigger problem is that I don't tend to write stuff with boilerplate.
That's fair. Yeah, in that case, GitHub Copilot would be more useful in terms of research for you, ChatGPT and GitHub Copilot, just to find different approaches that you might not be aware of. There have definitely been times where I've gone to my senior developer and I've told him, I use this AI tool and it's suggesting these 3 different approaches, and I think this one might be better, and he wasn't even aware that it existed. So just in terms of broadening your context and gaining more knowledge, you can use it that way. Yeah.
And it's better to research through Copilot than Google?
Research, Google, no. Okay, Google is, obviously there's a place for Google. Traditional like development, a lot of it has been Googling and like Stack Overflow, so there's definitely a place for it. But in terms of getting like a good overview, like a quick overview, ChatGPT is good for that. And then in terms of finding like different approaches for coding specifically, GitHub Copilot is good for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I've mostly been using Google for my research. So.
That's fair. Are there any other questions?
Can we use this also in PyCharm?
Yes, you should. No, actually, okay, wait. So is PyCharm, I'm not entirely sure. Is it part of JetBrains? Okay, then you probably won't be able to use it as part of, yeah, because it only supports 4 code editors right now. Visual Studio Code, NeoVim, and the JetBrains family. Yeah.
Because that is a combination. I can use it with Selenium and PyCharm.
Gotcha.
Best cases.
Okay. Yeah.
Quality assurance.
It's still very new, so hopefully it'll get added to other code editors. We'll see. Yeah. If you have GPT-4o, that's a little better than regular ChatGPT in terms of code.
Use that one, the free one, too, I mean.
Yeah, I guess it depends on your use case. I found 4o to be better for code than just regular ChatGPT.
It will not tell me everything, but
Yes.
you can go on.
Okay, any other questions? Yes.
I like numbers and I like benchmarks. And you mentioned testing Copilot versus other AI-assisted tools
Yeah.
for code generation, like Tab9, Kite, and Godot. I was wondering if you actually used explicit benchmarks for those to gauge your opinion.
So I haven't tested it like that, like specifically. My only exposure to the other chat completions would be through YouTube videos and seeing like reviews that other people have done on those tools. And based on those reviews, my assumption is that GitHub Copilot does come out on top. But it is paid, so there are free alternatives that come pretty close if you want to use those instead. Yeah. So I haven't done that testing. If you do it, I'd be very interested to hear what comes out of it.
Yeah, it's very hard to find like good benchmarks, whether it comes to that or benchmarks for LLMs.
Yeah.
But it's a good way to gauge the current landscape of tech. So
Yeah.
I'll look into it.
Yeah. Thank you. Let me know if you find anything. Any other questions? Okay, if not, I'll be around, and I think we're right at time anyways. Or we have a few more minutes. We can stick around for networking or whatever. Yeah, of course. Go this way. Thank you.
Nice job.
Thank you.
힘들나?
This is my dad.
वो माइक्रोफोन देना उनको
Oh yeah.
मैंने वीडियो का लिंक दिया था और टेक्स्ट करें मेरा फोन नंबर लेके
Thank you. Good job.